Muslims by Ali Mahmood. Episode 3. Spain. At the start of the 8th century, Roderick, the Visigoth king, ruled Spain. His able general, Count Julian, protected the kingdom, keeping the Muslims of North Africa at bay. When Julian left for Africa, he left his beautiful daughter, Florinda, under the protection of the king. Roderick was fired with lust when he saw Florinda. He raped her, and she became pregnant. She confessed to her father, who resolved to take revenge. In Africa, Julian met Tariq bin Ziyad and offered to take the Muslim troops into Spain. Tariq crossed over from Africa to Spain with an exploratory force of 7,000 men, stopping midway at a rock which was named after him, the Rock of Tariq, Jebel Tariq, Gibraltar. Having crossed, Tariq burned his boats to show his men that there was no going back. It was victory or death. The small Muslim army won complete and total victory over the much larger Spanish force. Spain was conquered and remained under Muslim rule for almost 8 centuries. Musa, the Umayyad governor of North Africa, was green with envy when he heard of Tariq's astounding victories. He rushed to Spain to share in the glory and the booty. He also struck Tariq with a whip and for a while had him arrested. The Muslims spread over the fertile south and named their land Al-Andalus. Andalusia was a land of rivers and valleys, perfect for cultivation, to which the Arabs applied their techniques of agriculture and irrigation. These farms laid the foundation for the wealth of Andalusia. The Muslims governed mildly, justly, and wisely. Low taxes and a high level of religious freedom kept the people content. It was a happy time. As time passed, the Berbers grew discontented that they were denied opportunity and were treated as second-class citizens. They rebelled, and the Arabs invited the Syrian army to help them. The Syrians defeated the Berbers, but instead of departing, killed the Arab king and set up their own chief. Instability and anarchy followed. At this time, Abdel Rahman, the last surviving Umayyad prince who had survived the massacre of his family by the Abbasids at the Banquet of Blood, arrived in Spain. The 5 years of his flight for survival had turned the boy into a man. Hardened by adversity, he had become an expert in the arts of strategy and negotiation. He was now an accomplished warrior and statesman. He was brilliant, resourceful and brave, blind in one eye and devoid of the sense of smell. Many tried to take Spain from Abdel Rahman, who ruled for 32 years. But the years of struggle changed the young dreamer into a formidable tyrant, cruel and cunning, suspicious of everyone, deserted by his friends and protected by his loyal personal bodyguard of 40,000 Africans. Ruling by fear, he led the foundation for the stability and prosperity of the great civilization that followed him. He was the equal of Charlemagne in the west and of Al-Mansour in the east. His dynasty was to last for 2.5 centuries. Over time, decay set in under weak rulers till finally Abdel Rahman III inherited a diminished kingdom torn by rebellion and strife. It was the destiny of Abdel Rahman III to rebuild a great civilization in Spain. Over 18 years, from 912 to 929 AD, he took back control of Andalusia. He was scrupulous in his honesty and justice. His decisions were fair, his taxes reasonable, and his administration efficient. He did not break his promises. Even his enemies could trust his word. His economy flourished. By this time, the caliphs in Baghdad were merely figureheads and could hardly be taken seriously. In North Africa, the Shia Fatimids had claimed the Caliphate and had set up their capital in Cairo. Abdel Rahman made a bold and innovative move, making full use of his Umayyad ancestry. He too declared himself Caliph of Islam. The period of the Triple Caliphate had begun. The world now had 3 caliphs in Baghdad, Cairo, and Cordoba. He ruled for another 32 years as caliph till his death. He had transformed Spain. When he died, a paper was found written in his own handwriting, saying that in the 50 years of his great reign, he had known only 14 days of happiness. His successor, Al-Hakim II, was a scholar more interested in his books than in governing the state. His famous library of 600,000 books kept him busy. He also founded one of the earliest universities. Where Al-Hakim's library was famous, his harem was notorious, not for the number of its occupants, but for their gender. Al-Hakim was said to have ran a male harem and was apparently a homosexual. This created a problem of how to produce an heir, but a solution was found. A Christian concubine, Sub, was dressed and groomed as a boy with the very masculine name of Jafar. She aroused the caliph's interest, produced a son, became sultana, and finally, on the death of her husband, became regent for her young son, the new caliph. Despite her posing as a male for the caliph, Sub was very feminine in her own romantic inclinations. She found a handsome and intelligent young man whom she employed to look after her affairs, with whom she then had a passionate affair. She promoted his career till finally, after the death of her husband, he became the prime minister of the realm. He was named Al-Mansour and is renowned in history as the greatest prime minister of Muslim Spain, under whom Muslim rule in Spain reached its golden prime. Dressed as a man, she produced her son, the caliph. Dressed as a woman, she produced the last great ruler of Muslim Spain. Al-Mansour was charming, generous and cunning, with iron will power, which he demonstrated in a meeting with the Council of Viziers, which was disturbed by the smell of burning flesh. Al-Mansour's leg was being cauterized with a red-hot iron while he was calmly debating the affairs of state. He never failed in his endeavors. Al-Mansour filled his army with Berbers from North Africa. These Berbers were to replace the Caliphate of the Umayyads in Spain after his death in 1002. This Berber army took control, installing and removing caliphs at will. Within the next 20 years, the crown changed hands 9 times. Abdel Rahman V was dragged out of his bathroom and slaughtered in front of his successor. Muhammad III al-Mustafki fled disguised as a singing girl but was caught and killed. The last Umayyad caliph in Spain, Hisham III, was thrown into a cold, dark dungeon. While the rebels announced the end of the caliphate, the only concern of the deposed caliph, freezing in the dark, was to beg for a light and some bread for his starving infant daughter. The tide had turned in Spain. Muslim power was now in retreat. Christian power was rising. Some of the Muslim city-states were conquered. In others, the rulers survived as vassals of the Christian king. Seville replaced Cordoba as the leading Muslim capital of Spain. The Caliph Al-Mu'tamid invited Yusuf ibn Tashfin, the Almoravid king in Morocco, to save him from the Christians. It was a decision that would lead him from the pinnacle of happiness and power to the depths of poverty and humiliation. Yusuf, with his small army, annihilated the huge army of Alfonso at the Battle of Zalaca, shipping home 40,000 Christian heads as a memento of his victory. Yusuf ruled till his death at the age of 100. The Almoravid conquest stopped the Christian reconquista for almost a century. The Almoravids were in turn defeated by the even more extremist Almohads, also from Morocco, led by the warlord and strategist Abd al-Muhmin, the son of a potter who conquered Algeria, Tunisia, Libya, and finally Spain. The dominance of the Almohads stopped the Christian reconquista for another century. Then, in 1212 AD, they suffered a disastrous defeat at Las Navas de Tolosa at the hands of a united Christian force. Legend has it that of the 600,000-man Muslim army, only 1,000 escaped with their lives. The Almohads were completely and totally defeated. All Muslim Spain lay at the feet of the Christian conquerors. In 1236 AD, Cordoba fell. In 1238 AD, Valencia fell. In 1243 AD, Murcia fell. In 1248 AD, Seville fell. All that remained was Granada, which survived for 2.5 centuries as a Muslim island in the sea of a Christian Spain. Two women, Isabella and Isabel, were instrumental in the final fall of Spain. Isabella, the prim Catholic wife of Ferdinand, and Isabel de Solis, the beautiful aristocrat who was captured and passed as a slave to Abu al-Hassan, the king of Granada. The old king fell for her instantly and offered to make her his queen if she converted to Islam. Isabel was wild but practical, and queen or slave girl was an easy choice. Aisha, the first wife of the king, was consumed with jealousy. She conspired against her husband and turned his son against him. The split kingdom of Granada quickly fell and the rule of the Muslims was ended forever. Isabella and her deadly inquisitors, Torquemada and Ximenes, set about purifying the kingdom. They first attacked the Jews, who were ordered to convert or leave Spain. 50,000 converted, 100,000 chose ruin and exile as the deadly Inquisition went about its terrible torture and genocide. Next came the turn of the Muslims. By 1500 AD, Ximenes boasted that there is now no one in the city who is not a Christian. All the mosques are churches. The entire kingdom will convert. Those that could afford to go went. The poor who could not afford to go converted, or at least pretended to convert. The converts, called Mozarabs, knew nothing of Christianity and lived in fear. They were forbidden to dress, eat, or follow their old customs. Refusal to eat pork or drink alcohol would meet with severe punishment. In 1609, King Philip III signed an edict denouncing the remaining Muslim inhabitants of Spain as heretics, traitors, and apostates. The entire Muslim population was given 3 days to leave Spain on threat of death. By 1614, Muslim Spain had ceased to exist. In the century following the fall of Granada, 3 million Muslims had been removed from Spain. Spain, one of the greatest powers of the world, entered its golden age in 1600, was in decay by 1650, and in ruins by 1700. War, extravagance, and bad government reduced the population from 30 million to 7 million. Spain was by then illiterate and bankrupt. 4 centuries later, on the 11th of March 2004, 10 bombs exploded on 4 trains, killing 191 people and wounding 1,800 in retaliation for Spanish participation in the war in Iraq. The perpetrators of the bombings listed the loss of Al-Andalus as one of the justifications for the bombings. Egypt. By the second half of the 10th century, the Ismaili Fatimids took Egypt and created their caliphate in the west. At this time, the Vids controlled the Abbasid Caliphate from Baghdad. The Vids and Fatimids were Shias, and for the first time, the Shias controlled the major part of the Muslim world. The first Fatimid caliph was the paranoid Ubaydullah al-Mahdi Billah. His first act on taking over was to kill his able general Abu Abdullah, who had won him his kingdom. Famine and plague had created a power vacuum in Egypt. Al-Mu'izz, who would become the 4th caliph, founded the new capital city of Cairo. The golden age of the Fatimids began as capable rulers promoted merit, tolerance, trade, and education. The economy was masterfully handled by the finance minister Yaqub ibn Kilis, a converted Jew. Yaqub reduced taxes, promoted trade, and maintained a high-growth economy. The most controversial of the Fatimids was the 6th caliph, Hakim. Idealized by the Ismailis and worshipped by the Druze, he was named the Mad Caliph by Western historians. He was an eccentric tyrant who murdered on a whim. He was a dedicated patron of education who founded the famous Dar al-Ilm, the House of Knowledge, but a ruthless administrator with an obsession to eradicate corruption and immorality. He ordered the killing of dogs, the burning of chessboards, and invented terrible new forms of torture. Once he cut off the hands of a musician, then sent him 1,000 pieces of gold to make amends. Then, feeling he had been too kind, he cut off the man's tongue. The great scientist Al-Haytham came to Hakim and offered to design a dam at Aswan to harness the Nile. Success eluded him, and knowing the caliph's fearsome reputation, he feigned madness to escape the wrath and punishment of a caliph himself unstable, if not mad. The Aswan Dam was shelved for almost 1,000 years until the Egyptian president Gamal Abdel Nasser commissioned the project in 1960. Once, in a fit of rage, he ordered that old Cairo be set on fire, and for 3 days watched it burned and pillaged till he ordered a stop. Finally, one night he walked out into the desert and was never seen again. His pleasure-loving son Zahir became caliph and ruled for a few years before dying of the plague. He was followed by the 7-year-old Muntasir, who ruled through ups and downs for 60 years. Egypt was hit by a terrible famine, and finally people started eating each other. Using hooks or rope, they fished for passers-by, hooking them, dragging them up, cooking and eating them. One woman described her experience. "I was dragged into a room covered with blood, stinking of dead bodies. I was thrown naked on my face, my hands and feet tied. Cutlets were cut from my hips, roasted and eaten. When my captors passed out drunk, I escaped." Famine was followed by plague. The price of food rocketed as the price of houses and jewelry plummeted. A house was sold for 20 pounds of flour, an heirloom necklace for a mere handful of flour. The Fatimid Empire declined till finally the great Saladin extinguished the dynasty and ended the era as gently as he would have snuffed out a candle. Saladin was a slender man of dark complexion, a Kurd born in Tikrit, the birthplace of Saddam Hussein. He was not a great general and always preferred diplomacy and negotiation to fighting. He was indifferent to the trappings of power. His food, clothes and home were simple. His small house in stark contrast to the vast caliph's palace with 4,000 rooms that he inherited, together with the sacks of jewels that he gave away. Jewels which included an emerald 4 fingers long and a ruby of 2,400 carats. He kept nothing for himself. Saladin enjoyed chess and polo. He had a passion for horses. He was a family man whose wife gave him 16 sons. His brothers were his chief lieutenants. Saladin was kind and generous to all, and fortune in turn was kind and generous to him. His effortless rise is a story that defies belief. Reluctantly, he went with his uncle, General Shirkuh's army, to Egypt. Then, Shirkuh killed the crafty Fatimid vizier. Shirkuh then died of overeating, and the young, inexperienced and weak Saladin was chosen to succeed his uncle. Al-Adid, the last Fatimid caliph, a sick young man, died. Saladin's sultan, Nur al-Din, died. Amalric, the Christian king, Saladin's most powerful enemy, died. In quick succession, luck, destiny or divine intervention had removed the 5 men who could have obstructed the rise to power of the reluctant leader. When Saladin was governor of Egypt, he received an order from his sultan, Nur al-Din, to terminate the rule of Al-Adid, the sick Fatimid caliph. Saladin had Al-Adid's name removed from the Friday prayer in the mosque, but ordered that he should not be informed of the change. If he recovers, he will know the truth soon enough. If not, let him die in peace. Famed as the terminator of the Ismaili Fatimid Caliph, he had earned the hatred of the Ismaili assassins who spread terror with their dramatic public assassinations of powerful men. Their Grand Master was the Iraqi-born Rashid al-Din Sinan, the Osama bin Laden of his time. The founder of this dangerous sect was Hassan al-Sabah, Lord of Alamut, who operated from his mountain base in Persia a century earlier. Hassan was ascetic, abstemious and pious. He had no pride or arrogance and spent his time studying, praying and preparing his new breed of assassins. Hassan killed one son on suspicion of murder. The boy was later found to be innocent. He killed his second son for drinking wine. His wife and daughters left him to live out his life alone with his deadly mission. The assassins claimed they could kill anyone. Usually when they sent their fidayeen, the victim died. 3 times they sent killers to Saladin. 3 times they failed as his proverbial luck saved him. As a precaution, Saladin wore chainmail and slept in a tall wooden tower. Finally, an emissary of the assassins came to see him with a message. Saladin kept his guards on hand, but the emissary refused to deliver the message unless the guards were removed. Saladin ordered his bodyguards to leave, but retained his 2 most trusted guards, saying, "These 2 do not leave me. If you wish to deliver your message, do so, and if not, go. I regard these 2 as my own sons, and they and I are one." The messenger turned to the 2 Mamluks and said, "If I ordered you in the name of my master to kill this sultan, would you do so?" They answered yes and drew their swords, saying, "Command us as you wish." Sultan Saladin was astounded and the messenger left, taking them with him. And thereupon Saladin inclined to make peace with him and enter into friendly relations with him, and God knows best. Saladin's dream was to unite the Muslims, defeat the Crusaders, and retake Jerusalem. After total victory at the Battle of Hittin, he moved on Jerusalem. Saladin tried his best for a peaceful capitulation of Jerusalem. He offered extraordinarily generous terms, but the Christian leaders were determined to fight. After 2 weeks of siege, the city surrendered. Saladin, as conqueror, showed chivalry, mercy and restraint, earning the respect of even his foes. He set the ransom money for the Christians at a low amount, and for the poor who could not afford to pay, he himself paid, earning the undying gratitude of those they freed. Saladin never made the pilgrimage to Mecca. He died honored but poor. Careless of wealth, he had given away fortunes. His own wealth when he died was not enough to pay for a simple funeral. His advice on his deathbed to his son was, "Win the hearts of your people and watch over their prosperity. It is to secure their happiness that you are appointed by God and me. I have become as great as I am because I have won men's hearts by gentleness and kindness." Shajar al-Dur, the wife of al-Salih, the last Ayyubid Caliph, was an intelligent and beautiful lady. She started her career in the harem of the Caliph, and after his death ruled first on her own and then as the wife of Aybak, the first Mamluk Sultan. When her husband fell in love with a new mistress, she murdered him in his bath. She, in turn, was beaten to death by the palace slave girls. She was the last queen of the Ayyubid dynasty and the first queen of the Mamluks. The Mamluks, slave mercenaries from Central Asia, were a race apart from their Egyptian subjects. They spoke a different language and lived apart as a military oligarchy. They ruled for 2.5 centuries, continuing the tradition of foreign rule in Egypt. The Fatimids had come from the Maghreb. Saladin was a Kurd. After the murder of Aybak in his bathtub, Qutuz took control. Hulagu, the grandson of Genghis Khan, sent envoys. Qutuz had them executed. It looked like a bad move, a big mistake, but luck intervened. Thousands of miles away, Monki, Hulagu's brother and boss, died. Hulagu had to get back to headquarters to join the negotiations on succession of the empire of Genghis Khan. Taking revenge for Qutuz's bad behavior was no longer a priority. Hulagu departed with his main army, leaving his general Kitbuka in command with a small force of 20,000 men. The armies met on the field of Ain Jalut in 1260. The Mongols were led by an experienced general, but the Mamluks were led by the great General Baybars, a blonde, blue-eyed giant with immense strength and a wicked sense of humor. He was an astounding administrator and a visionary statesman. Within a year of becoming Sultan, Baybars invited to Egypt the surviving members of the family of the Caliph who had been killed by Hulagu. The new Caliph in Egypt in turn appointed Baybars as his legitimate Sultan. After a brilliant rule lasting 17 years, Baybars died drinking poison intended for another. Degenerate Mamluk sultans ruled on. Some were alcoholics, one spoke no Arabic, one totally illiterate, and one both illiterate and insane. Finally, they were defeated and destroyed by the army of the Ottoman, Salim the Grim. The old-style warfare of Mamluk honor and personal valor in battle were no match for the new style of warfare mastered by the Ottomans: technology, artillery, guns, and long-range weapons. Egypt became a province of the Ottoman Empire. Sultan Salim departed for home, taking with him the puppet Caliph, who later resigned, passing the Caliphate to the Ottoman Turks from Central Asia, who were not even Arabs.